If we want to heal, we must change the language that we use to speak about healing. Thanks for tuning in. It's been my observation that, let me back up. Peter Levine, in his book, In an Unspoken Voice, How the Body Releases Trauma and Restores Goodness, talks about how we can get caught in chronic immobilization, chronic freeze states as regards complex PTSD. One of the things that he says is the keynote for how this process happens is when fear gets coupled with going into immobilization or freeze. So if you go into a freeze state and you are fearful, that the two get associated together, and as Norma Deutsch says, neurons that wire together, fire together. And so you end up with both fear and immobilization triggering each other and leading to this, what we would call maladaptive pattern. And so part of the healing process involves uncoupling the two from one another, having someone experience immobilization and freeze without it necessarily being a fearful experience, and helping them understand that. I would add to this, culturally, one of the things that I see happening in my practice with lots of different kinds of conditions, not just PTSD, complex PTSD, is would be the coupling, the words that are used, the language that is used to describe someone's experiences, someone's symptoms, tend to induce fear. So we talk about what's happening in terms of this process with all sorts of negative kinds of things like helplessness. We speak of it in terms of analogies or metaphors that induce fear, that increase the level of fear around the experience. Allow me to elucidate. Military type metaphors. So even outside the PTSD realm, well, no, I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to say something like cancer, right? Cancer happens, and pretty much a huge percentage of the time you hear of people talking about they're waging war against cancer. Fight the fight. Fight for a cure. Military models, military metaphors. We're going to target the chemo to the specific cells. The problem is this kind of mentality divorces us from the idea that, again, symptoms, trauma, freeze, immobilization, none of these things happen in isolation. They happen in an individual. Getting back to my earlier point, part of the process is trying to uncouple the fear from the actual symptoms, from the actual experience, from someone's immobilization and sensation in their body. How do we do that? Well, one of the things we do is we change the language in terms of how we speak of what's happening. We need to get away from these words that denigrate the body, because the body is part of that picture. The body is the venue where we experience sensations. And so reframing our experience in terms of its information, its communication, it's giving us illumination, the genre, of what's happening to us. And very often, 9 times out of 10, it's the guidebook, it's the map, it's the picture in terms of how we go about the healing process that I would say we often cannot do without those symptoms guiding us. But if we're oriented in this military model where we think in terms of how many troops do you have on your side? Are the troops more than the enemies, right? Enemy. But wait, our body is part of the enemy. And so it's no surprise that this kind of mentality ends up causing more trauma. We can get more caught in the loop. We don't heal because we don't recognize the healing power in the body that is very much tied to this network of what's happening to us. All of these symptoms, this whole picture is us. That piece cannot be separated. And so to speak of it in terms of kill the enemy is very much to speak of it in terms that denigrate the body. So stop using language that denigrates your own healing response, your own body. Neutralize the way you're talking about it. Speak of it in terms of communication, information. It's a much more neutral way of looking at it, where, yes, you have communication that can be intense. You have communication that can be severe, right? But when we reframe it in that context, we are much more able to approach it in the kind of orientation we need in order to heal. We are much more able to utilize the information that is embedded in the whole process rather than polarizing, right? Splitting, where it's all good or it's all bad, angel or devil. And instead, realizing that we have certain susceptibilities, we have certain kinds of genetics, we have all sorts of factors, certain childhoods that are part of us, that ends up being part of this holistic picture of what happened to us and how we heal it. That is all. Thanks for tuning in. And by the way, I know I've said it before, but read this book in an unspoken voice. This is great. You will find it extremely illuminating in the healing process. Thanks for tuning in. Adios.